across Northern Ireland on your radio and on BBC Sounds. This is
The Stephen Nolan Show.
So, what is going on within the Ulster Unionist Party? Multiple sources telling the BBC's Jane McCormick that there have been internal tensions over Doug Beattie's role as leader of the UUP in recent weeks. What's that mean? Is he going to resign as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, or is he going to issue a statement today fighting for his position? We'll have more on that in just a second. Also this morning, political garbage. That's how a former Assistant Chief Constable has described the decision by the PSNI to conduct criminal investigations into officers who joined in celebrations of Armagh's All-Ireland GAA win. The Chief Constable, John Boucher, addressed the incident at the policing board earlier this month.
No one is being suspended, no one is being sacked, and no one is being relocated.
The police
However, nor do I support the officers of the actions of the officers.
The police say it would be inappropriate to comment on an internal investigation. The man to top's already commented. Boucher, the Chief Constable, has commented on this to the Public Policing Board. The BBC also understands an officer who switched on the siren to celebrate is under criminal investigation. Is this proportionate and sends a message that no police officer is above the law, or is this totally over the top? Here's how to get in touch.
Call 03030 80 55 55. Standard rates apply. Tweet at Stephen Nolan. Get the news. Make the news. Be the news. The biggest show in the country starts now.
The Stephen Nolan Show.
Monday, the 19th of August, it's the Nolan Show from the BBC, and here's the news at 9.
Good morning, I'm Eve Coleman. BBC News NI understands there is growing speculation over Doug Beattie's future as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. Mr Beattie took over as leader of the party in May 2021. It's understood Mr Beattie intends to issue a statement later today to make his position clear. Our political correspondent Jane McCormick takes us through what we know.
We believe that there have been internal tensions over his position in recent weeks. I have to say, what we're being told is that this stems back to the selection of Colin Crawford, who became the North Antrim MLA. Last month, he replaced Robin Swan, who went to Westminster. We understand that there have been difficulties in the party growing since then.
Hundreds of residents in a housing estate in Newsnards have spent the night out of their homes after a suspected Second World War bomb was discovered on a building site. Army personnel have used diggers to pile sand on top of the device at the Rivenwood housing development off the Movilla Road. They're hoping to carry out a controlled explosion. Stephanie O'Fee is one of the residents affected.
Towards the back of the development, that's where the bomb is, so my house is very close. So obviously there's concerns what damage is going to be done to our homes, and likely that won't be covered by insurance. And before leaving our homes, I was asking the police, what can we do to secure our homes, to repair them as best as possible, to keep them secure. And there was no guidance from the police, so we just had to leave our homes and hope for the best.
The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has said now may be the last chance to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza and bring hostages back to Israel. He was speaking on a visit to Jerusalem, where he's due to meet the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this morning. Mr Blinken said it was time for all sides to agree a deal without excuses. Thousands of US Democrats are descending on Chicago, where the party's national convention will today formally endorse Kamala Harris as its presidential candidate. Before travelling to Chicago, Ms Harris was campaigning in the key swing state of Pennsylvania.
When you stand for working people, you fight for working people. When you stand for freedom, whether it be to make decisions about your own body or love who you love, you fight for those things. When you believe in ending child poverty, you fight for that. When you believe in what we need to do to lift up the middle class, you fight for the middle class.
The funniest joke of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival has been announced.
I was going to sail around the globe in the world's smallest ship, but I bottled it.
The winning one-liner was chosen by members of the public from a shortlist drawn up by judges. This year they picked the comedian Mark Simmons.
But I think the best joke's when it creates like an image in your head. I just do one-liners. That's my thing. I find it uncomfortable talking too long on stage without a laugh, so I try to get to laugh as quick as possible. So in an average show, I've probably got about 200 jokes.
Now with the weather, here's Jeff Maskell.
The rain that's across Donegal at the moment will continue to push east through the morning, turning our weather cloudy and wet. That rain turns increasingly heavy and persistent at times this afternoon. Winds of 20 to 30 miles an hour this morning will build to gusts of 50 miles an hour along Irish Sea coasts later, on a cool day with highs of 14 to 17 Celsius. Tonight starts cloudy with the potential for some thundery showers after midnight. Then tomorrow is a mix of sunny spells and increasingly frequent showers with highs of just 13 to 16 Celsius.
BBC News.
Right, let's find out what's happening within the Ulster Unionist Party. Jim McCormick reporting this morning that there's growing speculation over Doug Beattie's future as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. Well, what does that mean, Jane? Is he going to stand down?
It's not totally clear, Stephen, but what I would say to you is that we have multiple sources telling us that it's looking very likely that Doug Beattie could at some point step down as leader today, because we understand that there have been growing internal tensions about him staying on as leader in recent weeks. We are told that this all ties back to a selection meeting for Colin Crawford, who became the new North Antrim MLA when Robin Swan moved to Westminster. We understand at the time that Doug Beattie wasn't happy with how that had gone, and I think there has been tension simmering away underneath the surface since that took place mid-July, and it sounds like this has now come to a head, and we understand that there will be a statement at some point from Doug Beattie today spelling out what he plans to do. But I should say to you, we felt it was important to put what information we have at this moment in the public domain.
And what does that mean, not happy about the selection process? Do you have any more on that? Why wouldn't he be happy?
Not a great deal. I will say our understanding is that there were a number of candidates in for the job. There may have been a view that Doug Beattie may have wanted somebody else to get the position. Now I should say that I have tried to contact Doug Beattie directly to put some of what we know to him. We've had no response so far. It just sounds like this has become incredibly messy over the last few weeks, and it stems back to this, and it's a strange thing, I think, to happen, because people will think back to how the Ulster Unionists fared in the most recent election, getting that representation back at Westminster, doing well enough in other constituencies. So I think there will be a lot of head scratching this morning going on, but I can tell you we understand that things are really not good at the top ranks within the party, and it sounds like it's going in the one direction today, which would be that Doug Beattie could very likely have announced by the end of the day that he is stepping down as leader.
He's a fighter, Jane. So there's the possibility that he might be making a statement coming out fighting, but that's not what you're being told by your sources. Is that right?
That's correct. That is not what we are hearing at this moment in time. Now, the other thing I would say as well is that the question mark is, if Doug Beattie does step down, who leads in his place? I think that this will make him the fifth former leader of the party who's still an MLA at Stormont. I think attention would turn to the likes of Robbie Butler, for example, who's the current deputy leader. I think these will all be things that people within the party will be talking about at the moment, and certainly some of them have been talking to me about. And we know that the party's conference is due at the end of September, the 28th of September. So if this unfolds today, as we're being led to believe that it will, then I think it's going to be a very busy week for the party as they try to rally and try and to sort something out to put somebody else in Doug Beattie's place.
Jane, thank you. Obviously, we'll follow Jane today and find out. She's got the story. We'll find out from Jane throughout the day here on Radio Ulster what's going on. Editor of the newsletter, Ben Lowry, with us today. Good morning to you, Ben.
Good morning, Stephen.
Well, it's very, very interesting and a little bit strange, Ben, is it not?
Yeah, well, I didn't have any inkling that this was going to happen. I mean, one thing that isn't a surprise in this is that the Ulster Unionist Party has, I wouldn't say that it's divided in where to go. I don't think so much as a clear division, but a bit like the SDLP, it has a great difficulty in knowing where to go. And there's no doubt that there are people who within the party who feel that a lot of the successes they had, a lot of the results that they got in the recent election in constituencies in a number of places, including in East Antrim and Lagan Valley, where they really polled very, very strongly. And their overall vote, I mean, they got 60% of the DUP vote. That's 3 for every 5 DUP votes. There were 3 UUP votes. And there are people in the party who think that the reason for that is that they've moved in a sort of decisively liberal way. And then there's a very significant part of the party that is more conservative, that's more rural, that's based all over Northern Ireland, that isn't, you might say, inclined towards a woke response to issues, and that wouldn't really want to go in that way. And that is a fun. As I said, it's not a clear division. It's not a bitter and visible division, but it's definitely a tension within the party.
John Tongue, Professor of Politics, Liverpool University. How much of a political force is the Ulster Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, John?
Well, it's obviously operating in much reduced circumstances compared to its heyday, but there were signs of revival at the general election, winning a seat. Whether that was a Robin Swan vote rather than an Ulster Unionist Party vote, I think is a point that can be debated. But there were signs of revival under Doug Beattie, much needed. I mean, the UUP, if it does get a new leader, that'll be the 6th leader in the last 14 years. That's not exceptional within unionism. The DUP is on its 5th leader in the last 14 years. That's what unionism tends to do. It tends to change leaders rather than address fundamental problems. But the timing is a surprise. Jane's already outlined the situation in terms of Colin Crawford. Woe betide any Ulster Unionist Party leader who tries to interfere in any way with the autonomy of local constituency associations. They don't like that. In many ways, the Ulster Unionist Party hasn't been a party at all. It's been 18 pretty autonomous constituency associations in which the writ of the leader doesn't really run that deep within the party. That's part of the problem. So it's a structural problem. There are also wider political issues. It's fairly well known that Doug Beattie was quite keen on the idea of the Ulster Unionist Party leading the opposition at Stormont rather than the SDLP. But he couldn't take his party with him on that. And so the Ulster Unionist Party remained in the executive. It wasn't that Doug Beattie was massively in favour of going into opposition, but it was his preference. He didn't get his way on that. So there are wider political forces here at work. If you can't get your way as leader, why would you remain as leader?
I remember, John, Ben Laurie, I remember when Doug Beattie was in trouble after the texts that he had sent out came to light from when he was in the army. And he was in trouble. His job was under threat, and he walked into the studio and he sat down beside me, and he fought and fought for his job. And actually, his party and the public rallied round him because he was so open about what he had done. Do you expect that today? Do you expect a frank, open conversation, Ben, from him today as to what he's thinking and what has brought him to this? Would he really step down from the leadership of his party over a single selection process?
So the first thing is he was right not to step down then. You could say tactically, because that all blew over and was very quickly forgotten about. As to what he's intending to do, the short answer is that I don't know, because I have tried to phone him after what Jane was saying on Good Morning Ulster and haven't spoken to him yet and haven't been able to get senior people in the party yet. But he is a man who speaks candidly like that. He is a man who talks in very personal ways. He talks about being not only a new approach to politics, about wanting about being a different political leader. I mean, he's very much somebody who came into politics late in life, and he supports that. He was very behind bringing in his former military colleague, Colonel Tim Collins to stand in North Down. So yes, I would expect him to speak candidly. Of course, the most important thing is this statement going to reaffirm that he is standing down, and that is from making soundings, the inkling that I'm getting, even though I haven't spoken to him or anybody in the party, senior elected representatives yet, about whether or not that's the case. But I understand that it looks like he will be going.
If it is about the selection of Colin Crawford, you had, it was actually, John Tongue, in Ben's newspaper, the newsletter. If you go back to July, there was Councillor Darrell Wilson, who said he has concerns. He's a long-serving Ballymoney councillor, and he had been overlooked in favour of a party colleague who was selected to represent Ballymena, Mid and Ulster, Mid and East Antrim Council for the first time last May. He said, I had put my name forward to be considered for the vacant MLA position in North Antrim, and it's with a heavy heart that I share the news of my unsuccessful bid. I'm awaiting feedback from the party regarding concerns and questions that I have surrounding the process. Do you get a sense here of how vulnerable a party leader is?
Yeah, a party leader cannot exert his authority over local constituency associations, particularly in the Ulster Unionist Party, where they like to choose their own candidates and they don't particularly like central interference. You can argue as well that Doug Beattie, in terms of bringing in Tim Collins, the episode that you just mentioned, that didn't work out very well at all for Doug Beattie. So there is rivalry between local constituency associations and party leaderships. You get that in all parties, but it's particularly true within the Ulster Unionist Party. I think the difficulty for the UUP is where do they go from here if Doug Beattie does step down? Because, more than half their MLAs have done the job. Tom Elliott, Mike Nesbitt, Robin Swan, Steve Aitken and Doug Beattie himself. So that only leaves 4 unless they're going to get a retread.
What about Robbie Butler?
Step down. Well, with Robbie Butler, he's the obvious choice as deputy leader. He is the obvious choice. They may well simply say, yeah, Robbie Butler is the man. John Stewart might have an outside chance. We only know it's going to be a man because I don't think they've got any women UUP MLAs. But yeah, I mean, Robbie Butler would be the logical successor if Doug Beattie does decide to step down. But the timing's extraordinary. Just as the Ulster Unionist Party re-enters the House of Commons, just as the party had its best election result in a number of years, the leader decides to step down over what is, in many ways, a pretty obscure debate over a local constituency selection process. That, to me, indicates there are wider forces at work here. It's not just about the constituency selection. There is that issue of the opposition and what to do at Stormont. But even so, I mean, it's an extraordinary decision to if Doug Beattie does step down because, I think he is, clearly the obvious leader of the party at the moment. It's not a wash with obvious replacements.
John Tongue, Ben Laurie, thank you very much indeed. Remember, we have not heard from Doug Beattie. This is not confirmed. Jim McCormick being very careful in her reporting today to say that is what multiple sources are telling her Doug Beattie may do today, but we need to wait and hear from Mr. Beattie himself. Now, next on Nolan this morning, criminal investigations understood to have been launched into the officers who some people would describe as joining in the celebrations of Armagh's All-Ireland GAA win. Other people would decide they were involved in careless driving. It's been described, the fact that there are now criminal investigations, as utter nonsense and political garbage by Alan McQuillan, who's a former Assistant Chief Constable. Why, Alan? Good morning. Why should process not be followed here?
Well, let's look at where we are, Stephen. We've had a succession of riots. We have immigrants in Northern Ireland being burned out of their shops, burned out of their premises, burned out of their homes, many of whom are people who work in the health services supporting us. We have PSNI so much in its uppers, A, it's broke, and B, it's having to borrow police officers from Scotland. And our politicians, some of them, are not prepared to look at those issues, not prepared to address those issues, but are after a police officer for sticking a flag out of a car window. In terms of the realities of Northern Ireland... Well,
it's not the sticking of the flag, it's the driving, as you know.
Well, first of all, my understanding is 3 officers have been dealt with are being dealt with in relation to this. Secondly, it's the driving. I have seen the video, I'm sure you've seen the video, I saw no evidence of careless driving there. I saw no evidence of any danger to anyone. It is the sort of thing that would normally be dealt with by a quiet word from a supervisor, but it's suddenly elevated to this investigation that, frankly, on past form, will grind on for months.
Well, let's remind ourselves what John Boucher, the Chief Constable, told the policing board about this.
My reaction to that footage is very straightforward, as you might expect. We are the police. And that privilege and responsibility demands that at all times we act professionally and independently. That did not happen on Sunday night in Camler. I'm very alive to the polarised commentary which has taken place since the footage came to light, which demonstrates yet again that policing in Northern Ireland remains something of a lightning rod for society. I've had many, many phone calls in both condemnation and support of the officers' actions. Some have asked for the officers to be suspended or even sacked, whilst others have supported the officers and called for commendations for them. Let me be crystal clear. No one is being suspended, no one is being sacked, and no one is being relocated. However, nor do I support the officers of the actions of the officers.
So no one's being sacked, no one's being suspended, no one's being relocated. And yet when we asked the police today, well, why is there a criminal investigation? They're telling the BBC it would be inappropriate to comment. Mr. Boucher has already commented. The question is this proportionate? Does this, Alan, meet the smell test for the public about what the right thing is to do for those officers in the context with which they were doing it? And some people would say the police don't display very much discretion when they're investigating anybody else.
Well, the police do tend to display a lot of discretion, and I think I would agree with everything that John Boucher said in that meeting. The point is how you deal with these things. People do make mistakes. They do things that they shouldn't have, sometimes with the best of intentions. For example, you have John O'Dowd last week saying that police officer with that flag did more for community relations than all the other efforts in the last 10 years. It is a two-sided situation. We have two communities here, and we have some politicians who are always simply looking, in my view, for opportunities for offence. I think that this would have been best dealt with by a quiet, quick word with the officer.
Well, a quiet, quick word. I'm sure Jim Allister, leader of the TUV, given what he said about this, wouldn't agree. Tell us why, Mr. Allister. Good morning.
Well, this just goes down to a very simple question. Are police officers above the law? Those who impose the law on everyone else, should they be given a byball on the same law? And it seems very clear to me that the answer to that question is no, they shouldn't. And if there is evidence of careless driving, then due process needs to be followed, and ultimately the PPS needs to take a decision upon whether or not to prosecute. If that's what would happen with you, Stephen, or with me, or with anyone else, so why not with a police officer? It's as simple as that.
Alan?
Well, that's actually not correct, because the vast majority of cases where police officers stop someone for a minor offence of careless driving, they will exercise their discretion, give them advice, and send them on their way.
It's
not correct to say that.
Well, nor is it correct for Alan to say that there was no prima facie evidence in the videos of careless driving. You had a driver who was waving a flag out the window, who was doing donuts on the road, who on one video I saw clearly inconvenienced another driver, and all that in a very crowded situation. But those are the matters that need to be investigated. Those are the matters for the PPS to reach a decision. But the fundamental here is that no one, least of all a former Assistant Chief Constable, should be proclaiming that police officers should be above the law. They should. Once you do that, then they lose all independence, and policing is the sufferer, and policing loses all credibility. It's a matter of standing back from this objectively and saying, if I did that, if you did that, If an unknown citizen did that,
but Jim, are you
would
not
they be subject to the implication of the law? Or not?
Are you not aware of the police giving people warnings quite often? That they don't when they're treating other people. They might pull someone over to the side of the road and tell them that I don't know, they've been swerving over the road, they've cut up a lane, they've done whatever they've done, and look, don't do it again, we're giving you a warning. It's not a criminal matter immediately, is it?
No, and a formal caution might be the ultimate outcome here.
No, but everybody isn't given a formal.
That's a matter for the PPS to decide, but you cannot excuse what was seen by saying.
But whether it was seen or not, are you telling me, Jim, that people up and down this country will not be aware of situations where they've been pulled over and they've been told, look, you cut up that lane, you didn't put your indicator on, you didn't do whatever, on your way, don't do it again?
Yes, that happens.
So how come you don't support that happening with police officers that have a bulletproof vest on because they're endangering themselves for us?
Because police officers might be expected as the implementers of the law to know the law, to implement the law, to adhere to the law, and not to defy the law.
So what do you want? Do you want these guys sacked? Is that what you want?
No, let's be very clear. I want due process to take its course. I want the PPS to reach a decision whether or not there should be prosecutions here, and then I want the courts to adjudicate upon that. That's all I'm asking. But let's be very clear. When I go...
By the way, a file might not even go to the PPS.
Well, if it doesn't, there'll be questions to be asked and answered about that. But let's be very clear. When I go to the road traffic order and look up careless driving, driving without care and attention, it doesn't say this is a criminal offence provided you weren't celebrating the GAA. It says this is a criminal offence. So that's the fundamental here. And you cannot colour it. You cannot pretend that it gets a byball simply because of those circumstances. Because once you do that, then you open a terrible can of worms whereby every time the police then act against somebody, they will be said, why are you acting against me when you didn't act against yourself?
I just don't hear you, Jim, during, for example, bonfire season season, talking about the illegal dumping of wood on public property all the time. I don't hear you talking about the pure criminality associated with people setting fires throughout Northern Ireland.
Sorry, Stephen, if police officers were breaking the law at bonfires, I would be saying
I'm not talking about police officers. I'm talking about members of the unionist community who grab bonfire wood. No, I'm talking about the strict... If you are someone that talks about the strict interpretation of the law, then how come every 12th of July, 11th of July and Boney Night, you're not calling for everybody that leaves wood at a bonfire site to be arrested and criminalised? You don't do it.
What would the criminal offences be, Stephen?
Sorry, setting fire on public property without proper insurance? You don't think that's a criminal offence?
You've talked yourself into a nonsense.
No, I haven't.
We're talking about those who implement the law. Police officers.
Doesn't matter. You want the law to apply to everyone equally.
I do, and I don't want police officers to be above the law, because once you put police officers above the law, you have no law.
All right, and so just to be clear, those people that are climbing up public lampposts and putting union flags on them without permission, is that a criminal offence? Is that a breach of a bylaw?
A bylaw is not a criminal offence generally. You should know that. Is it a breach of a bylaw?
Is it a breach of the law?
It may therefore be a civil matter.
Should they be prosecuted? Should anyone putting a union flag on a lamppost be prosecuted?
It is very clear that when a police officer drives...
You're not answering the question.
If he did, then he's breaking the law.
Let's answer the question.
I would be breaking the law.
Would you support those people putting union flags on public lampposts being prosecuted?
I support...
You're a Puritan.
And I support anyone and everyone being prosecuted for breaking the law.
Does that include unionists putting union flags on lampposts? Yes or no?
No, Stephen, just as I am not deciding whether that driving was careless driving, to me, I think
I'm going to ask you the question one more time. One more time. For those unionists that put union flags on public lampposts, and if it's a breach of a bylaw, do you think they should be prosecuted?
If it's a breach of the bylaw, there's no such thing as a prosecution.
Do you think they should be punished?
You think that should be a criminal offence?
Do you think they should be punished?
Come back to me and tell me what criminal offence you're talking about.
Do you think they should be punished? You're a Puritan for the law.
you get punished for breaching the criminal law. You should go and read some criminal law, Stephen, and then you wouldn't be making such ridiculous points.
Alan McQuillan?
Well, it depends where the flag's flying. If you're standing there sticking flags up deliberately outside the local chapel, then it might be a public order offence. So, I mean, but I think the point is clear. Jim has made up his mind. He said he wants this investigated, put to the DPP, and then decided on by the court. In other words, the officer's already been convicted in his mind. He's headed for court.
He hasn't said that. He has not said that.
He said the very opposite.
By the court. He said it should be decided by the DUP and the DPP, and then it should be adjudicated on by the court. The only circumstance...
Adjudicated is the key point. They should be adjudicated by the court, not by you, Alan, not by me, by the court.
The point is, it should never go anywhere near the court, in my view. If it was any other
circumstance, above the law.
Anybody
you
else...
want these officers to be above the law, not
no,
to be,
I want them to be dealt with fairly.
You want them not even to be investigated.
I want them dealt with fairly proportionate.
I don't even want them investigated. You say it's ridiculous to investigate
what I have said is, well, you know, Jim, there are many, many people who are caught for motoring offences. And the vast majority of them are dealt with by quiet words of advice. For example, PSNI,